Good morning. Today is Monday, September 28, and today we're going to continue on in our discussion about engineering design. And in order to do that, we're going to go back to our journal from last week. So if you have your spiral, go ahead and take it out if you're using the spiral. Otherwise, let's go ahead and go down to This Week in Science, and we're going to click on that. And then I want you to click on, I want you to first look and see, notice that there are a few things. I have linked last week's science agenda so that you can be able to find it from last week. And then we have what we're going to do in class, and then we have your assignments. Make sure that you're always following along and getting these assignments done, because several of you, I think, are starting to get pretty far behind in your assignments. So keep up so that you don't get overwhelmed, okay? All right, today we're going to go back into our digital notebook. You'll notice that I'm saying we're going to focus on slide 3. And when you get there, remember to click on the Engineering Design Notebook blue words to make it go into big format. And that should take you to your notebook that looks something like this. I've designed mine, I've put some stickers on it, and I made sure that I have my name on it. And on Friday, we went over the engineering design. And that was basically a process to come up with a solution to a problem. So we talked about the steps. First, we got to know what the problem is and what it is we need to build. Then we need to brainstorm a solution for that problem. And once we have that idea of what we want to build, we're going to actually build it, and we're going to optimize that solution. That means make it the best version of that solution that we can. So we build it, test it, decide does it work or not. If it doesn't, go ahead and change it or modify it, then rebuild it, test it again, and you do that over and over and over again until we get a design that we really like, or as best as we can get in the time that we're given. And then we go down and we communicate our results. If our results are it didn't work and we can explain why it didn't work, that's totally fine. But we're just making sure that we communicate what we've got so that everyone knows what work we've done and we can be proud of the hard work that we've accomplished. All right, so today we're going to go to slide 3, and we're going to focus on slide 3, which is about criteria and constraints. And criteria and constraints are a part of defining the problem. So let's go ahead and start with a definition. I'm going to notice right here that I'm already bolded, so I'm going to go ahead and unbold my words here. And a criteria is just anything that your design solution needs to have or do. Another word for this, and I'm going to go ahead and bold and underline this because it kind of helps me remember what I'm looking at here, is that these are the requirements. So when we look at our scenario, which we'll do in just a minute, we are going to look for all of the things that our design, our nest, has to do or has to have. It has to have this. It has to be able to do this, right? So we're going to have those items. And then there's the constraints. Now, constraints are the opposite of criteria. And a constraint is anything, oops, I don't want that bolded, so I'm going to unbold that, is anything that that limits your design solution. And I'm going to go ahead and bold and underline again. And these are what we would call limitations. So these are things that basically you cannot go over. And the 3 most common ones that we're going to see are limitations in time. So with our bird's nest, we only had an hour's time. There's going to be limitations in what materials we can use. In the case of our bird's nest, that was only the ones that, only the materials that birds might use. Okay. And then the final one, which we did not have in our bird's nest challenge, is money limitations. So an example is our coffee mug, right? We talked about this. We would want to make sure that when we build a brand new coffee mug that keeps our hot drinks warm, we don't want it to be too expensive. So you might say that there's a limit on the amount of money that you can spend making it. Each cup can only cost $8 to make, so that we can sell it for 10 to 15 and people will still buy it. Because if it's $50, I don't care how good it is, I'm not buying it because that's just too expensive. Okay. All right. So let's go back and look at our bird nest challenge. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom over here to our scenario. And I'm going to go ahead and use my highlight function. And actually, let me go back over here. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the word criteria. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this thing right up here that looks like a little highlighter. And I'm going to click on it and I'm going to choose a color for criteria. All of my criteria are going to be blue. And all of my constraints are going to be yellow, I think. Let me see. Yeah, I'll make them yellow. Okay. So I'm going to go over here, and as I read this, I'm going to highlight anything that sounds like a criteria, something that it has to be or do, and I'm going to highlight anything that's a constraint in yellow. All right? So you and your family are out for a walk when you come across an egg that has fallen out of its nest. Miraculously, it is not cracked. Worried about what will happen to the chick inside, you decide to carry the egg home and take care of it until tomorrow when you can take it to the Portland Audubon Society or Bird Sanctuary. In order to protect and care for the egg overnight, you will need to build a nest that can safely hold an egg. Okay, so I'm seeing the word safely hold an egg, and I'm thinking that's something that it has to do, right? So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that in my blue color, or something of similar size and weight for the evening without falling apart or damaging the eggs. So it needs to be able to last the evening without damaging the falling apart or damaging the egg. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in blue as well. To prevent contamination of the egg, you can only use materials from the outside that a bird might use, such as mud, plant parts, strings, feathers, and water. All right. Anytime we see this word only, that means that you can't use anything more than what's there. Can you use less than what's there? Yes, but nothing more. So we know automatically that that is going to be a limitation because you can't use anything outside of those materials. If you can't go outside, you can use flour and water instead of mud. Like a bird, you cannot use tape or other special tools or glue. Okay, so cannot. Anytime we see cannot, again, that's a limitation. You cannot do beyond that, right? All right, to make your nest, you need to finish building your nest within 1 hour. Okay, so we have 1 hour. Within 1 hour. That's a time constraint because you can't use more than an hour to build it, so that you have a place to keep your egg during dinner time. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and plug this information into our chart. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here. And because I like to have everything highlighted so that it makes sense, I'm going to go ahead and highlight these with my colors again. Constraints were yellow and criteria were blue. Okay. All right, so we said that our criteria, the first criteria was that it had to keep the egg safe. Okay. And we also said that it needed to, what was the other one that we said? Let's go back over here. Without falling apart or damaging the egg. Okay, and it needed to stay together overnight. Needs to stay together overnight. Okay. All right, then we had some constraints. The first constraints had to do with the materials. And the first one was it could only be materials that, limited materials. And we had materials only birds would use. And we also said that you couldn't use any special tools, no special tools. Okay. And that was right over here, right? And then the second constraint was a time constraint. So we're going to say limited time. And in this case, the limit in time was that you only had 1 hour to build. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. I'm going to let that be there for just a second while I zoom out. All right. So criteria are the requirements, constraints are the limitations. We've gone through and given a definition, and we've gone through our scenario and highlighted the criteria and constraints that we see, and then we've listed them. And that is it for today in terms of notes. Now what I would like you to do is go back to your home page in Canvas. And we're going to go back to This Week in Science. And I want you to click on the formative criteria and constraints practice. This is your assignment for today, and it is due by tomorrow.